We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win, and the others too.
September 12, 1962. President John F. Kennedy announced to the world an ambitious goal, a goal to embark on a mission symbolizing to the world the supremacy of the United States. Immediately, questions sparked across the nation. Was this an ethical decision?
I'm questioning the whole thing. Why are we doing this? Are we really ready to do this? And lots of folks have those questions.
My first reaction was that we couldn't do it and that it was somebody's dream.
To putting a man on the moon, you had to figure out how to make things go fast enough.
The Cold War. The brutal challenge to become the overlord country. Russia and the United States. Two ingenious countries fighting silently to the top of the rough rope to total aptitude. Technology was key to power. Advances in nuclear weapons and spaceflight dug up tension from the dark soils of political rivalry. October 4, 1957. Russia launches satellite Sputnik. This new advance in space technology shook the U.S. with an earthquake of realization.
And of course, the Russians were putting things up. They'd already launched and put the first satellite up, and now they were putting humans in space. And yes, so the race was on. And you realize that we were deep into the Cold War at that time. And so the political influence was always there, and even us workers at the ground level, that knew that we were in a race and that we were part of developing systems that was going to win this race ultimately.
At the same time, pressure was emanating from Kennedy's political opposition. In 1963, the Senate Republican Policy Committee issued a 19-page space critique, a matter of priority, questioning, is it more important to have a man on the moon than to conquer cancer, which will take the lives of 4 million Americans now living? Is a fistful of lunar dust meaningful to the 17 million Americans who, we are told, go to bed hungry each night? When 25 of America's 55 living Nobel Prize winners gathered in St. Paul, Minnesota in 1963 to dedicate a memorial to Alfred Nobel, United Nations Under-Secretary Ralph Bunche represented the opinions of many, stating, there would be less justification for conducting such efforts as a race, particularly when there is a crying need for the intensive application of science and funds to problems like food and water supply, overpopulation, mental health, and control of cancer and heart disease. Columbia University physicist Dr. Polycarp Kusch held a similar perspective. In the face of pressing natural needs, I take a dim view of spending $20 billion in a relatively short time in exploring the moon. In a widely publicized attack on Apollo, Dr. Philip Abelson, director of the Carnegie Institution of Washington's Geophysical Laboratory and editor of the influential journal Science, published an editorial pointing out that machines could find the answers to most scientific questions about the moon far more safely and more cheaply than can man. Par for the decision-making process in the United States government, politics, coaxing, maneuvering, and debating occurred for the Apollo program to be approved. The first part of the many steps to putting a man on the moon was the Apollo 1 rocket. On January 27, 1967, 3 astronauts were performing a plugs-out integrated test, an assessment to confirm that all systems would work during a real launch. a fire erupted in the command module. By the time personnel could get the burning hatch open, Virgil Gus Ivan Grissom, Edward Higgins White, and Roger Bruce Chaffee perished. Possible failures and dangers of going to the moon were made evident. The general public wondered if it was really worth all this money just to watch something explode.
We wanted to start off with a $10 billion budget. Well, got started in Washington and talking, they said, you can't have but $5 billion. And we said, well, we're not sure. They said, well, that's all you're going to get.
On November 9th, 1967, the largest space rocket ever created sat on the launch pad, Saturn V. At 7 a.m. Eastern Time, Apollo 4 launched into space with a rumble of applause. Next came Apollo 5 and Apollo 6. Both marvelous rockets launched into space successfully. Apollo 7 was the first manned Apollo mission in the U.S. Apollo 8 was the first time man gaped at the far side of the moon. The U.S. had officially lapped Russia. The Apollo 9 and Apollo 10 missions tested the astonishing lunar module in Earth's orbit. All systems were a go.
One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
I was very excited, and I thought we finally accomplished technology finally accomplished a major milestone, and I thought it was wonderful. And I watched it that night on black and white TV, small TV set. One of the best effects was that we had international cooperation, and we had many nations participate, and we learned how to work with other nations towards peaceful activity rather than a war-type activity. We're able to coordinate. The other thing is that we were able to find out what the universe was about and how it affected humans on Earth, and we were able to project and predict better conditions around the world.
You had to take a lot of stuff with you, and every little ounce had to be worried about, could you do it? And we found out, figuring out how to make things that we could go to the moon and use. That's why a whole lot of the radios and televisions and everything that we have here on the Earth now will work.
Instruments, devices, equipment, tools, and gadgets developed for the Apollo lunar program ushered in a limitless era of spin-offs. Thousands of products routinely used every day. The adaptation of inventions and application of lessons learned have transformed into things that make our lives better, safer, and longer. Indeed, the moon debate was anchored by two distant points. On one end, the politics of the Cold War between the United States and Russia. On the other, tremendous conflict to spend billions to land man on the moon first. Yes, America was first. But because of the moon debate and all that it triggered, far more than ever imagined has been gained for mankind around the world.